Thank you very much for the recognition, Mr. President. I want to thank Mike Lee for coming to the floor and speaking with such heart and conviction. I want to thank Senator Durbin for also his stand on the floor today. But please understand, Mike Lee, Chuck Grassley, Senator Durbin, Senator Leahy, so many senators on both sides of the aisle have been speaking on this issue for years. In fact, since before I became a United States Senator, this moment has come. But as Senator Durbin began talking about the issues of the day, where there is so much frustration, so much concern, so much consternation, so much divisiveness on this issue of criminal justice in America. It's made me think personally a lot about this idea of hope, because I tell you, this week, I've talked to a lot of people who seem to be indulging in a dangerous, toxic state of being, which is hopelessness about criminal justice issues in our country. I've appreciated Senator Durbin, who has not just been a senior senator, not just been steadfast in working on this issue, but he's been a friend, calling me up, not just this past week, but weeks before, where lots of Americans were indulging in hopelessness about the divisiveness in our country, about the injustices in our country, about the ravages of a broken criminal justice system. And as I've been thinking about hopelessness, I keep coming back to this understanding that was taught to me by teachers on the streets of Newark, New Jersey, that hope does not exist in an abstract, that hope is the active conviction that no matter how bad things get, despair will not have the last word, that hope is a choice that must be made amidst hopelessness, amidst despair, amidst frustration. You got to choose hope. And that choosing hope means that you commit yourself to a process that doesn't divide this country, but that unifies this country with the conviction that we can be a nation that makes real the words that we pledge when we say we are a nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This week, we need those words. We need that hope. And so when Mike Lee and Dick Durbin, two politicians on opposite sides of the spectrum, said, hey, this is a time that we should be pushing hope, indivisibility. We have a bill that addresses issues at the core of so much of the frustration going on. It doesn't solve all the issues, it doesn't wave a wand, but it will advance us towards liberty and justice for all. Because unequivocally, we have gone off the rails. Since 1980, the land of the free broke with the rest of the world and became unequivocally the incarceration nation. Our prison population exploded since 1980. The federal prison population up 800%. Our overall prison population up 500%. We only have about 5% of the globe's population, but 1 out of every 4 incarcerated people on the planet Earth are right here in America. And in response to a criminal justice system that lost its proportionality in its punishment, that seemed to become more about retribution than restorative justice, a criminal justice system that's rife with the stories that Mike Lee talked about when he talked about Weldon Angelos, and a judge who himself cried out about the injustice of sentencing someone to 55 years for a nonviolent drug crime, or Alton Mills, who Senator Durbin spoke about, who sentenced someone to life in prison for a nonviolent drug crime. We in America went off the rails. And so I am hopeful today because on the right and the left, not just members of this body, but from the Koch brothers to Newt Gingrich to Grover Norquist to the ACLU, people on both sides of the political spectrum said we can do better because this broken criminal justice system is hurting us. Rather than being a tool for public safety and social order as was intended by our criminal justice system, it instead became an industry and an end to itself. It became a massive exploding bureaucracy, draining our economic prosperity. In fact, one study showed we would have 20% less poverty in America if our criminal justice system, our incarceration rates were similar to our industrial peers. This has been a divisive drain on our cohesive society, a misappropriation of taxpayer funds. While our infrastructure has been crumbling, we've led the planet Earth in building out an infrastructure. In fact, between the time I was in law school in the mid-90s to the time I became mayor of Newark, we were building a new prison in this country every 12 days. Congress has increased federal spending on prisons by 45% since about the year 2000 alone. And Congress has cut spending on the things that keep us safe, like law enforcement, at the state level by 76%. Putting someone like Weldon Angelos in prison for 55 years, hundreds of thousands of dollars in a long, disproportionate sentence for a nonviolent crime that could have gone to public safety, hiring police officers for our community. But what is painful to me in this time is that our criminal justice system, it would be painful enough, those data that I gave, but our criminal justice system clearly disproportionately affects poor people. Leading authors like Brian Stephen to say, we have a criminal justice system that seems to treat you better if you're rich and guilty than poor and innocent. Blacks and whites have no difference in America in using or selling drugs. But African Americans are about 3.6 times more likely to get arrested for selling drugs. Instead of a criminal justice system that unites us under principles of justice and fairness, we see it persecuting disproportionately groups because they're poor or because they're of color. If you look at Latinos, they account for the largest group of offenders convicted of an offense that has a mandatory minimum at 38%. And Native Americans are grossly overrepresented in the criminal justice system. 80% of Americans in our criminal justice system, 80% are represented by public defenders, meaning that they are deemed by the court to be indigent, to be too poor to afford an attorney. Our justice system does not reflect our values. This drug war is not being carried out in a way that is fair or just, and it's not just hurting poor, the mentally ill, the drug addicted, the minorities. It hurts all Americans because it drains our resources, it drains our treasure. And when I say treasure, I don't just mean money. We have a point in America today where millions of children have had parents who are incarcerated. It hurts generationally the best of our nation, the promise of our nation. And the irony about our lack of action in putting this bill to a vote is that states are already moving quicker than us. Red states, Georgia and Mississippi and Texas, are doing things now for years that we've been proposing in this bill and have yet to enact, that have shrank their population. And guess what has happened in states like Texas and Georgia and Mississippi, who have lowered their prison populations? Guess what happened? Their crime went down as well. Because when you have a system that is not about retribution, but about restorative justice, that has proportionality in sentences, you not only save money for your state, but you also empower people to succeed and lower crime. When states start to put drug addicts in treatment as opposed to jail, it empowers people to succeed, saves money, and lowers the prison population. Common sense. And so states, red states, have acted. We've seen the success. But the federal prison population, 800% increase, taking away money that should be spent on homeland security, money that should be spent on investing in public safety, money that should be sent for our public universities, money that should be saved for the taxpayers, is now going, still fueling one of the biggest growing bureaucracies we've seen in the last 40 years. And so there's calls for unity in our country, but I tell you, we've got unity. When I can stand in partnership with Mike Lee and Chuck Grassley, when you have people like Patrick Leahy and Dick Durbin, these folks are not normally mentioned together as partners on legislation. But I'm proud that some of the most esteemed members, the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, the ranking member of the Judiciary Committee, both agree. We can put more justice in our justice system. We can do something to reverse this trend. We can begin to put rationality back so that the values of this country are made more real. I'm proud to have negotiated and worked with the chairman, Grassley, who is sitting across the aisle from me right now. Honored. It's one of the more, in the 3 years I've been in the Senate, it's one of the more proud things that I've accomplished is to find common ground with my Republican colleagues on the other side in a bill that I know from the neighborhood and block that I live on to cross country would make a difference. And now we've encountered some sclerosis, some blockage, some dam between where we stand now and greater justice for our nation. This has been a tough week. It's been a week of frustration and grief and sadness. This is a time we should choose hope. It's a time that we should choose unity. It's a time that this very body should be saying to America, hey, we got challenges, but we can find common ground. We can come together, left and right, black and white. We can do better than we're doing now. It's a hard walk we have ahead, but this body can start leading on issues of justice. There's been other difficult times in our country. When this body answered the call, there's been times where people were fearful and people doubted, and there's been times where people felt their heart heavy. And I'm proud that in our history, it's during those times that leaders emerged and chose hope. Mr. President, my prayer is that in these waning days of this Congress, with all the important things we have on our agenda, that we remember that there are people right now that are stuck in despair. There are people that don't believe in our indivisibility, as we say in our Pledge of Allegiance. There are people that are frustrated. It's my hope that when it comes to issues of criminal justice that are so obviously broken, that we choose reform, that we choose healing, that we demonstrate unity, that on this issue, we bring forward a bipartisan bill that begins to cast away some of the darkness that hangs over our country with the light and the wisdom that's in this bill that reflects both sides of the political aisle, and I believe that reflects the best of who we are as a body. Thank you very much.